Hello, we are live. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This session and this episode will be all about the weather and does it impact us really? What is it all about? Because I know that we've had fires, we've had excessive heat, we've had all kinds of different weird weather occurring. Torrential rain, monsoons, the whole nine yards, flooding in areas that don't flood. All that kind of stuff's happening. So today we wanted to explore what is it about the weather, and are we at the effect of weather? Does it really affect our well-being? So we wanted to do that. So welcome back. We've been on a 2-week break, and now we're back. So let's explore the weather. So welcome, Betty. How are you today?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm good. All right. So let's dive right in. And just so you know, we are sponsored by the Institute of Metaphysical Science. That institute has classes and programs and all kinds of things you can participate with, as well as materials and writing and books and seminar audios and all kinds of things like that. So if you want to check that out, you can go to scientificmetaphysics.org. Okay, so let's dive in. So in your book, Mind is the Athlete. Well, let's do this. I'm going to take that away. Okay. So do you want to introduce this topic better than I did or in a different way than I did? Or what do you want to say as a preface statement about weather?
Yeah, handling something like the weather or fires and floods and catastrophes around the world and so on, that all is designed to lock you into believing that the thing you see in the mirror, like the Betty that I'm looking at in the television here, or the computer, that's who I am. And that's just the piece I use. Who I am is not that at all. And the deal is, when you're working with metaphysics, when you can live yourself as the reflective presence of being, the thing you use for a piece to play the game, thing I use called Betty, is in great shape. Because when I'm being myself, rather than being the image in the picture, being myself, I'm standing in the ground of perfection. And when you're standing in the ground of perfection, the representative language that shows up, called Betty, can't have any problems. It's handled one way or another. And when a disaster occurs, you will be the little guy that isn't there. When something unforeseen occurs, you'll find that you're taken care of just fine. Something will occur, something will come up that will remove you from disaster. Because disaster is a point of view of believing that you're that two-legged thing walking down the street, looking in the mirror, going to work every day, taking the bus, eating lunch. That one, that piece that you have to play the game with, that's not who you are. That's just what you look like playing the game.
Yep. Okay, very good. So let's dive in. And in your book, Mind is the Athlete, on page 39, you have a quote from Mary Baker Eddy, which is, "The scientist is alone with his own being and the reality of things."
That's right. And I'm glad you read it that way, because the reality of things is what does you in. If you believe that the things are the stuff you see, hear, feel, taste, touch, that stuff, they're not the things of spirit. And the things of spirit, which are not seen, heard, and felt, ensure perfection is present, functioning as your experience of living. But if you don't claim that for yourself, if you don't prefer to stand there in that presence, you'll find yourself a victim of the view that you've got, called your comfortable way of living, the human view.
Mm-hmm. Or in our particular situation, the uncomfortable way of living because the weather is acting up.
Yeah. And I can say, well, you're uncomfortable because it's hot. I feel fine because it's just great here.
Right. Well, it's actually fine where I'm sitting right now because we have the air conditioning on.
Okay.
Anyways, it's all
But
good.
actually, whether I think it's good, bad, or indifferent, I'm going to make myself a victim if I think that that thing called Betty is all there is to me.
Right. Well, the other side of it, or another way to extend that out in the conversation we're having right now about weather, is if I believe that my well-being is dictated by the weather that's happening, or that my future well-being may be very well much impacted by some future weather scenarios that might unfurl.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So in Mind is the Athlete, on page 39, you quote, she, Mrs. Eddy, was not speaking of the image you see in the mirror, the ego image, but was calling attention to a reality beyond the appearance of things, which is what you just called out.
Yep.
Okay, very good. And also you go on page 39 to say consciousness, fundamental to all being, clearly acknowledged as the generative principle of all existence, is the key to freeing yourself from limitation and restriction.
Yeah.
So let's unpack that a bit.
That's a goodie. Consciousness is fundamental. Consciousness constitutes, constructs everything that exists. What it looks like to you individually in the language world of your own identifying of what's going on. And for each one, it's different, by the way. But consciousness makes the difference in whether this world that we walk through works for us beautifully or gives us problems one after the other.
Mm-hmm.
It's who am I being? What am I crediting with the fact that here I am? What do I think is source? What do I think that needs to look like? Do I care what it looks like?
Right. And if you think that source of your well-being is whether it's nice weather or horrible weather or whatever the weather is, that would be a misidentification of the generative principle of existence.
Yep, that's true. And the thing is, it's not a big secret, but it's so simple actually that we miss it a lot of the time. But if I want Betty to be reasonably comfortable going along day to day, I better identify with the being that has Betty show up. Because when that being is acknowledged and appreciated for just what it is, perfection present, all inclusive, all encompassing, whole, joyous, free, that presence is acknowledged. Betty walks along free of any problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And for those of you, if you have any questions, any comments, you can type those into the chat or the comment box on where you are, and we will see those. There will be a little bit of a delay, but we would love it if you have any questions or you have a comment or you want to ask anything at all. We're open to all of that. We'll include it. So feel free to participate. And if you're enjoying the conversation, please, you can press the like button, the heart, whatever you want to acknowledge that this is resonating with you. Okay, so on we go. And then again, in Mind is the Athlete, page 39. Just note page 39. All this stuff is on there. Page 39, our self beyond the ego image manifests as successive views reflective of a reality not fully seen.
Yep.
So our self beyond the ego image. What's the ego image?
Betty.
So beyond this.
Yep. Beyond the seen, heard, and felt.
Okay. Manifests as successive views reflective of reality. So reflection, reflective of the one reality present, but you're not fully seeing it.
Yeah, well, when I'm playing with the language world, when I'm eating dinner, when I'm going to the store, when I'm driving the car, and so on. Whenever I'm engaged with the Betty activity, I want to become aware of what has that occur. Because the being, whole, perfect, complete, the being that has Betty show up, sets the stone, sets the course for me. And if that's not acknowledged, then I'm wandering around thinking Betty's important. And that gets me in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So I really want to be aware. And it isn't like it's a grueling thing. You just have to say, oh, yeah, okay, there's one thing going on here. Mm-hmm. Science tells me that all is infinite mind. Well, it is. It's a universal intelligence that's functioning, constituting everything there is to do about me. And Betty is just the vehicle in the picture that plays the game.
Right. So what about the weather?
So the weather is the thing that challenges that all the time, because you want to think that you're uncomfortable because you're too hot, or you're too cold, or you're too wet, or it's too dry. I mean, you name it. You can name any phase of the weather. We relate it to how does it affect me? And we forget that the me that we think it affects isn't me at all. It's just the vehicle. It's the look. It's the language saying, yep, something's present here. It's whole, perfect, and complete, but this is what I'm using right now to move around the game board.
Right.
Called human living.
Right. So if your perspective is that you're too hot, you're too cold, it's the weather, climate change, whatever you want to call it.
Then I nailed myself as an object, an entity, separate from consciousness, being affected by something that's also separate from consciousness. And if all is infinite mind, consciousness is fundamental. If I'm consciously living that all is intelligence functioning,
right,
all is well.
Yeah, now we're down to the back to that generative principle of all existence. Consciousness, fundamental to all being, clearly acknowledged as the generative principle of all existence, is the key to freeing yourself from limitation and restriction.
Yep.
So either live with the limitation or restriction, or you can acknowledge consciousness fundamental as the generative source. So consciousness, that's the God idea. People could call that God, whatever, but that's the generative principle of everything.
Yeah, it's the power that has the universe function.
Mm-hmm. And that's the key. And as soon as we start to ascribe, no, it's the weather, no, it's this, then we start becoming the victim of that. But then we're limited in what we can experience to that world that we've sentenced ourselves to. Is that a good way to put it?
We don't have to be a victim unless we say so.
Right. Okay. All right. So then also on page 39, again, important page, in Mind is the Athlete, you say, acknowledgement of this has the frailties of being human dissolve into strength and purpose.
Yeah.
Acknowledgement of consciousness?
Yep.
Okay. I was just wondering what the acknowledgement of this, what the this is, and for that it's referring to in that sentence.
It's ourself beyond the ego image.
Okay, got it.
It's the next sentence.
Well, we had that beforehand here.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So if you are living yourself thoughtfully, you really want to credit what has you occur, what has you be, because that's your freedom. Because the thing here, if that's all there is to me, it's going to be hot and miserable or freezing and needing more sweaters, or, it's going to be affected by all the stuff that I think constitutes my experience.
Right.
But I understand that the stuff is merely my identifying language for something is going on. but my acknowledgement of the facts of being acknowledges the reality that's present, which has that identifying language.
Right.
That sounds complicated?
Kind of. I won't lie.
I'm trying to make it simple.
All right. So Margaret Laird in Christian Science Re-Explored says, since man as conscious identity is principle performing, his activity is absolutely arranged for throughout eternity.
Yep. So man, which is the reflective presence of source,
okay,
that man as conscious identity is principle performing. Said another way, it's the God idea functioning.
Mm-hmm.
His activity is absolutely arranged for forever.
What does that mean, arranged for? His activity is absolutely arranged for? What do you mean?
It's not an accident.
Okay. So are we talking predestiny here?
It's perfection functioning, and it functions well. It functions on purpose. It functions effectively.
Whether that's the way we see it or not.
That's what's going on if you are living yourself as the being rather than as the piece on the board.
Right. Well, I would say it's what's going on no matter what. And then some are consciously aware and others are not.
Yeah. And we live according to what we are crediting with source. Right. We don't live the world as it is. We live it as we are.
Yeah. Okay.
So if I'm going to buy the picture that thing called Betty is all there is to me, I've got a rough road to hoe.
Right. Right. Sandy Jackson would like you to expand on living freely.
Living freely is when you take no thought for what's going on in your identifying language world. And in place of that are fully acknowledging source, fully acknowledging consciousness is all there is. That everything lives, moves, and has being mentally as the conscious being that you are.
Okay. In Christian Science Re-Explored, Margaret Laird says, we may not know humanly what to do, but because of our divinity, the science, the all-knowing mind, we are never without the information, the idea of what to do and how to do it.
Yep.
And can we call that intuition?
Yep.
Okay.
Instinct, intuition.
Mm-hmm.
If you can quiet down the chatter in your head that says, oh dear, what's going on here? I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix that. Oh dear. If you can quiet all of that down, mm-hmm. and even just for a moment, acknowledge there is an intelligence present constituting my being that knows exactly what to do mm-hmm. and how to do it. Right. And I will be quiet and listen. And I will discover that I do know what to do. And right. I'll do it intuitively.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. And in Christian Science Re-Explored, Margaret Laird goes on to say, in living the idea self-consciously, a doing and a done evolves that might be called a miracle.
Yep.
Right. I remember back, I don't know how many years ago, I read, what's the book that was about miracles? It wasn't Love, Medicine, and Miracles, but it was in the same genre, the same time. And it was basically a book that said so many people explore, they label stuff as a miracle, but then they don't actually explore, well, why did that happen as opposed to something else? Like we just kind of say it was a miracle. And then we just kind of go, well, it was a miracle. But this book kind of dove into that and explored the actual happening of these miracles. And it was fascinating. It was about the same time as that other book came out, but this reminds me of in living the idea self-consciously, a doing and done evolves that might be called a miracle. Or it would be like, I didn't even see it. I didn't even see it coming. Here it is. Wow.
Yeah. Well, human doing is divine done showing up.
Mm-hmm. That's a great quote. Human doing is divine done showing up.
When you are consciously aware.
Yeah. Consciously aware. And oh, by the way, next week, we're going to be diving into conscious awareness and awareness. It's going to be an amazing session. So mark your calendars now. I'm so excited about that one. All right. But we are on weather. Right now, we're talking about the weather and talking about the impact of weather and whether it impacts your well-being. So I think by now, everybody knows the answer to that question. Does the weather impact your well-being?
Depends on where you're standing, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does a lot, depending on where you're standing.
No.
Exactly. All right. Now, Mary Baker Eddy in Science and Health says spiritual causation is the one question to be considered for more than all other spiritual causation relates to human progress.
Yep. That's what we've been talking about. If I can identify with source, spiritual causation everywhere,
mm-hmm.
then I'm, it relates to everything I'm doing.
Right.
Yeah. And when I'm acknowledging the source, when I'm acknowledging reality, I'm acknowledging what's so, even in the face of no evidence. Like, I don't know why it looks this way, but I know that there is a principle functioning, whole, perfect, complete, right now, right here, constituting exactly what I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm.
When I can just get that sense and say, so I will know what to do when I need to know.
Mm-hmm.
Leave it alone, period. Allow it to be. The answer comes. And it comes amazingly quickly.
Fun.
And the reason it comes amazingly quickly is because it's present and I'm not seeing it.
Right.
And when I stop the struggle, there it is.
Right.
The answer is always present before the problem even arises.
Yeah. Right. It's already done.
Yep.
And then it's coming to view, right?
And coming to view has the look of you knowing what doing is needed.
Right. I remember Dad, when one of our houses was for sale, he was talking about George was going to show up. He's just driving across country as the buyer because you couldn't have a seller without a buyer. Remember that? It was a funny little thing that he went through, but it was super cool. Like, as a kid, there was this whole story of George is going to, he's on his way across the country.
He's going to show up.
That's right.
And he did.
Yeah. All right. So in Science and Health, also Mary Baker Eddy said, mind's control over the universe, including man, is no longer an open question, but is demonstrable science. And that's true today with a lot of what's been proven in many different genres even. So say more about that, Mom.
Well, everything we've been talking about geared toward the weather is exactly what this is saying, because if I understand that consciousness, intelligence functioning, is what's ruling the roost, so to speak, just the acknowledgement of that has me in sync, if I can use that word, with the facts of being. And that alone, you see, is the demonstration of everything is all right as well. And once you've experienced that, it's no longer a question for you. It's demonstrated, so this must be true. And keep proving it to yourself in every avenue of living. It's the same science, and it's effective no matter what. And we really need to be aware of this subtle thing that comes along called the weather that has us suddenly be a separate little entity that's going to be either miserable or uncomfortable or else just great because of the weather. The sun is shining. Oh, happy day. Either way, I don't want to credit Betty with any of that because it's the being that's causative. It's
Right.
the being that generates my well-being, so to speak.
Right.
Out of that acknowledgement, Betty's okay.
Yeah. And when you practice and really bring this into existence for yourself, you have the proof in your own life.
That's right. And that's the only time that's worth anything.
Right. Exactly. Because otherwise it's just intellectual.
Anything for you.
Right. Otherwise it's intellectual stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And I know that in living science, in the practice of that and that acknowledgement, pretty much never been let down.
Yeah.
So Science and Health, Mary Baker Eddy says, belief in material laws and in penalties for their infraction is the ancient error that there is fraternity between pain and pleasure, good and evil, God and Satan. Why did you include that in here?
Because the belief in material laws rules the roost of a lot of people's lives.
Right, but we're talking about the weather.
Yeah.
So the whole
law, oh, it's hot? Well, grandma's going to have a stroke. She can't stand the heat. That's what I'm talking about.
Uh-huh.
Oh, it's too cold? Oh, well, Freddie's going to catch cold on his way home from school because he didn't wear his heavy sweater.
Right.
It's that
that's the belief in material laws, and the penalty is getting sick, having a stroke for the infraction of that law or because of that law.
Of what you have called a law.
Right.
You live it as you are.
And it really is a belief.
It exists that way.
Right. But it really is a belief.
It's all belief. The whole thing is belief in material laws.
Right.
It's all a belief.
Right.
And it's ineffective unless you give it permission. Nothing happens to you without your consent.
Yes. Even though that consent may be sort of unconscious.
That's right. Unconscious is the blindest time to have. You're stuck with it.
Right. Right. And then basically she finishes that off saying this belief totters to its falling before the battle axe of science.
That's right. All those beliefs crumble when you live the science, even to the tiniest degree.
Right. Right.
And it's like that, just right.
Right. Just the acknowledgement.
Yeah. And the thing is, the minute you have demonstrated for yourself the effectiveness of living this science, the next 5 seconds, it's time to do it again and again.
The next 1 second.
Because I'm always looking from where Betty's sitting.
Right.
And there's always the temptation to think, oh, there's that going on over there. Well, I don't know what to do about that. Got the weather handled. What about that?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So anyways, what final words do you want to leave us with around weather? And then we will be here again next week, 7 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Pacific, to talk about awareness. So let's have one last word on the weather. And does it impact your well-being?
The temptation to think that the weather can either be good or bad, right or wrong, is a trap, because it wants you to believe that you are a two-legged little entity that can be affected for good or for bad. And you're not that at all. So all you have to do is acknowledge what is actually present when you show up calling yourself Kim or Betty or Henry or James or Brad.
Yep, very good.
It's what sets the stage for your experience.
Mm-hmm. All right, very good. And with that, we're done for our session today. Thank you so much for attending. And we will see you next week. next week at 7 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Pacific, and we'll be talking about awareness. So stay tuned, and we shall see you soon.